Hi, welcome back to Mel's Health. I'm Mel and I make videos about life after pulmonary embolism. So about 4 months ago, I made this video telling the internet that I had CTED, chronic thromboembolic disease, and how not to confuse it with CTEPH, which is chronic thromboembolic pulmonary hypertension, which is a much worse condition that stems from CTED but has much more sinister underlying effects. So after this, go watch that video to learn more about CTED, as it's a much more under-recognised condition. Well, if you saw my recent post-surgery update that I just posted, you will have seen that, much to my disdain for this condition, I was actually diagnosed with CTEPH whilst on the operating table, and now all my medical charts have a diagnosis of chronic thromboembolic pulmonary hypertension. I've said so many times in my old videos when I was going through all the evaluations and testings for my ongoing symptoms that I hadn't been diagnosed with pulmonary hypertension, and I was glad about that. It's not something that I wanted to hear. And I thought that the road was going to end with CTED as an explanation as to what was going on with me, and that would be the end of it. But here we are today. And I want to follow on from that CTED explanation to get across what CTEPH is. And if you do hear that result, you should be as taken aback as my husband and I were and treat it very seriously, because where this can lead to if there is no intervention put in is really, really dire. Okay, so CTED versus CTEPH. Here are the physical symptoms of both, and we'll add 2 extras for the actual CTEPH diagnosis. So if it isn't obvious, the difference in symptoms are basically things you can't actually feel physically. They're all to do with the internal functions and pressures going on, which you cannot see from the outside. So the actual physical symptoms I already had, obviously, when I knew about CTED, and I fluctuated like we all do in severity from day to day, being more tired than others and feeling the symptoms more than others. But little did I know that I had actually got to that point of deterioration where I fell into the realm of pulmonary hypertension, even at rest. So what really is hypertension? It's a condition in which the blood pressure in the arteries in the lungs, pulmonary arteries, is abnormally high. And I'll go back into science lesson mode for just a little bit. In a healthy being, blood flows from the right side of the heart into the pulmonary arteries in the lungs, and it picks up oxygen. In pulmonary hypertension, those pulmonary arteries have either narrowed, got stiff, or they're blocked, making it harder for the blood to flow through. This therefore increases the pressures in those pulmonary arteries, forcing the right side of the heart to work harder, which over time can lead to right heart failure. So if you have this testing, the pressures are measured with something called MPAP, which is what you'll see in your results. And that is the mean pulmonary artery pressures, and it's taken from an average of the pressures within the pulmonary arteries. Pulmonary hypertension is diagnosed when that MPAP reading is abnormally high, which is any reading above 20 at rest. Just as a little side note as well, when it comes to pulmonary hypertension, there's 5 groups classified within any kind of pulmonary hypertension. And for anyone watching this content and how it applies to me, I'm talking about CTEPH, which is group 4, and that stems from having chronic blood clots. You can only have CTEPH if you've had blood clots. If you have pulmonary hypertension for any other reason, it would fit into any of the 5 groups, which the information will be on the screen so you can see how the other classifications work. So upon getting my diagnosis, I had the luxury of having 2 sets of results just 7 months apart. So my husband, with the help of AI, plotted my deterioration on a graphs to show how health can be affected over time based on the current rate of degradation. It's actually really terrifying, and it just makes me want to help people advocate for themselves if they are symptomatic at all, because if something like this doesn't go untreated, this literally shows how survival is cut down so quickly if it's not detected and dealt with. So on this graph, you see the black line going from the green to the yellow section. That is my deterioration line. So if I hadn't been recommended for BPA surgery to treat my CTED, and then in turn had my pressures remeasured, I could have continued deteriorating into much worse hypertension territory, but fortunately it was caught when it was. This is plotted out on the red dotted line, which shows the projected increase in my pressures based on the current rate of deterioration. The scary part there is that this shows that within 3 years, I could have gotten to the point of heart failure, where the prognosis for survival is just 2 years. So that means that in another 5 years' time, which would be 10 years from the start of this entire journey for me, I could literally be gone. And that's absolutely insane. But it just shows how you must treat this diagnosis so seriously. The green dotted line, however, shows the projected improvements in pressures after BPA interventions to clear all those blockages which are causing the high pressures. And you can see that it plotted that I should remain within the green zone with no further complications. It obviously isn't as low as I was originally, but it isn't in the realm of danger anymore. And we did come to find out that on my final surgery day that my pressures had indeed returned to the green zone and were reading 15 on the day. This is something that's going to be continually monitored now. So I have an echocardiogram scheduled in August, and that will show if what's happened since my final surgery and if my recovery is basically headed in the right direction. It's also been recommended that I have yearly echoes now just to monitor everything and ensure that nothing is missed in the future. And just a little mini fact going back to when I was first originally diagnosed and admitted to hospital those 5 years ago, I had an echo on the second day that I was in hospital after that clotting episode, and my pressures at that point were at 32. Echocardiograms are obviously not as accurate as right heart catheterization, but they do estimate the pressures within the hearts when they're doing the ultrasound. So if you've ever had an ECG, it's worth looking at your results and seeing the MPAP estimation, not just relying on the commentary, because then you can see where you sit in the different levels of hypertension. I'll definitely report back on what my results are in August, so make sure you stick around for that. And if you do want me to do like a mini video on what an echocardiogram is, just let me know, because I can just do a brief explanation of what that does. Moving on to the treatment for CTEPH. Usually when CTEPH is diagnosed, it requires an actual intervention such as the BPA surgery that I had, or the full-on pulmonary endarterectomy, PTE surgery, which is the full-on open heart procedure to remove the chronic clots in the pulmonary arteries. In my case, I wasn't a candidate for the PTE surgery. I did have a consultation with Dr. DiPerot in Toronto, but I was better suited to BPA, which I'm grateful for because the other surgery is really, really invasive and has a super long recovery. So I'm kind of glad I was suited to the BPA instead. On to the prognosis. Usually, if you are eligible for either BPA or PTE surgery, then it's generally a curable condition. Like we saw in my case, the BPA interventions moved my pressures back down into the green zone. So if one of those interventions is suitable, prognosis usually comes under excellent. In cases where an individual might not be suitable for either a surgical intervention for a multitude of reasons, there is a medication that can be taken to relieve the symptoms of hypertension. It can also be used for those who have ongoing symptoms even following a surgical intervention. But without a surgical intervention to have those blockages interrupted, then like you saw on that graph, the prognosis really isn't great if you are lifelong living with pulmonary hypertension. As for life afterwards, having an intervention to try and cure the CTEPH, in my case and what I read from many other cases online, blood thinning medication for life is basically a must. There's not really any value in stopping them and risking any form of reclotting and having to go through this all over again for any reason. I was already on warfarin for life, so it's not an adjustment that I have to make in my daily routine, but there might be people out there who have to make that adjustment after having the surgical intervention. As for other forms of prevention, actually in general, this is a condition that is out of the individual's control. But you can make healthier life choices by not doing things like smoking as a number one, and then, no excessive alcohol, not gaining a ton of weight, giving up completely on exercise and all that thing, but just maintaining a healthy balance in life. If I want some chocolate or some beer, I'm gonna have that and enjoy life, but it's just not taking things to the excess. And on that note, between my husband and I, we like doing a lot of mountain-based sports, mountain biking number one, and things like skiing. So I will be documenting my recovery from CTEPH by doing those kinds of activities as well on this channel and see how things change with my new clean lungs. But I hope that explains CTEPH and gave some decent insight into what the condition is. If you do have any questions, pop them in the comments, and if there's any other topics you want me to cover around this, or if you have any other questions, do let me know. If you aren't already subscribed, do hit the button because it does help push the content out to people that might be searching for such information and currently going through this. And I love seeing that people are commenting on my videos after they found it when they're currently going through something, and it's helping them get the information that they need in order to have the good conversations with their medical professionals. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.